Okay, so do you have what you need to read something? Like,
Yeah.
oh, well, let's do it. Uh,
Okay.
so could we pretend that you're in your studio at home and
Yes.
what kind of books are you, what is it, are they kids' books or what are
Right now, what I'm reading is there's a woman who is a military wife, and her husband travels all the time for the last 3 decades, and she wrote like a 30-day devotional to women who
okay.
are able to choose. And then the next one right after that is the same author, and she did like a memoir of these military wives and their
Oh, okay.
stories.
Oh,
I
good.
just finished the last
And
chapter
are
last.
they, so there is a book and you're doing the audio version of this?
Yeah, so it's through
Oh,
Audible. So she
oh,
hired me through Audible.
oh, you get paid for this, I hope?
You do, yeah.
Okay.
This is my first one, and so I'm discovering how much work it is. And oh my gosh, next time for my next book, I'm gonna charge more.
Okay.
So
All
hard,
right.
but
So you're actually reading from the book, right? And
correct.
you
So
have a book like that or that book right
I
there?
have that book. I think I'm just gonna read that book
Let's
to you.
start with
Okay.
some chapter there. And what I'd like you to do is just imagine you're actually doing a recording. And of course, there is a recording being made that you'll be able to see and hear.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Um, and what was I gonna say? I had a thought just came and disappeared in the middle of that last sentence.
Oh, that's okay.
Um, just as much as possible, just be in that, be thinking
Yes.
this is I'm actually doing it for real for the book, but of course
Okay.
you're not. Yeah.
So I
And
normally.
I might interrupt you from time to time.
Mhm.
So don't take that as it won't be, it'll be because I'll want to ask you a question about something, whether you notice or just make a suggestion. But for the beginning, I'd like you to just read a couple, two or three sentences, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. So if I make a mistake when I read, I
Doesn't matter. Don't worry about mistakes.
I don't know, like see what I do so that you can see if it's weird, but
Oh,
I'll
okay.
just skip
Yeah.
the because
Don't
in
worry about it.
recording,
This is not the actual audio book, but I just want you to be doing
I'm reading. Okay.
what you would do.
All
Okay?
right, here we go. Day 30, a tapestry of grace. My life is but a weaving between my God and me. I cannot choose the colors he weaveth steadily. Oft times he weaveth sorrow, and I, in foolish pride, forget he sees the upper and I the underside.
Okay, let's pause for a second. What did that seem like to you? What from your perspective, how did that feel?
It kind of felt a little bit more like earlier in the week before I did the no effort because I get in my head like it almost feels a little robotic until I shake it out and have to like tell myself, you're free. Try it again. You know,
Right. It did seem, I mean, it wasn't bad at all, but it did seem like you went into a different world that was where mm, more serious world, maybe, let's say.
yeah.
Okay, so let's just do an experiment. You got another three lines we could do.
Hmm.
So you have a direction you can use. I'm free, right? And you're going to be reading these sentences, but there are going to be in those sentences some places where there's sort of natural pauses. Certainly between sentences, there are going to be natural pauses. If you can remember, and it does, and it's certainly not, don't worry whether you remember every time, but when you can sense a pause coming up, or about to be, you could just use that as an opportunity, because you won't be speaking during that pause, to just think, I'm free. Just a thought, no idea of what it's going to produce.
Okay.
Just have it as a background intention. Know ahead of time that there'll be many pauses where you won't use it. You just won't remember. But when you remember, you just gently bring it there.
Okay.
Bring that thought. No effort with the thought.
Got it. Got
Okay.
it. Not till the loom is silent and the shuttles cease to fly will God unroll the canvas and reveal the reason why. In dark threads are The dark threads are as needful in the weaver's skillful hand as the threads of gold and silver in the pattern he has planned.
So
Corey,
well, that was different, right?
yeah, I have to get out of this control where I think I'm going to I can create this perfect sound.
Well, who in the world can create a perfect sound, I wonder?
Yeah.
Not us mortals, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that's very fair, to allow myself to let go of the idea that that I even could create a perfect sound.
I don't know that that's a useful goal in a way. I think it's more that you're taking the words from the book and putting them in a different medium.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of like a channel for something.
Yeah.
It's not your book, so you don't need to be hugely invested in the content. Did I get the content right? That's not an issue because the book's already there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's one thing I noticed, and I think when you watch the video of yourself, you're going to spot. Um, After you played this part of it through, or while you're watching this part of the video, be a little bit interested in what's going on up here.
Mm.
And I think you're going to notice that there was a little more furrowing of your brow. Yeah, right there. That's it, exactly. And the second time there was a tiny bit, but it was way less.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of an indicator of something.
Yes.
Because think about this, whatever is involved in making sound, so certainly all this stuff's involved, right?
Yeah.
Voice box. This guy, these muscles up here, they don't really play a role. So if they're doing something, that's kind of an indicator that they're doing something that's not necessary. And that you're doing a little something that's not as
Little something
necessary.
that's
It's a
unnecessary.
little indicator. That's all it is, an indicator. That doesn't mean you should, oh, I'm not going to furrow, I'm not going to furrow. No, it's just a little byproduct of probably a little overall extra tightening that you don't need
Yeah, okay.
in
I feel
order
like
to read. That's all.
no, because the second I start overthinking I'm using too much brow, then all of a sudden I'm back
Yeah,
in that.
I don't
Oh,
want you to take that
just
as a
no.
message here, but just notice that because it's an interesting indicator
Okay.
of the fact that maybe you're adding a little extra attention to it.
Yeah.
The other thing that you might want to explore, and let's do a few more sentences with this thought in mind. There are those natural pauses that we talked about, perhaps after a comma or something, or certainly after a period.
Mm-hmm.
Do the same thing, we'll do the same project you did before when you can remember during those pauses to just put out this little fleeting thought, I'm free. Experiment with letting the pauses be slightly longer than you're used to.
Okay.
Just go do the next 2 or 3 sentences with that
Sure.
thought in mind.
hmm I mentioned in the reading Searching for Beauty how my family and I visited the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam. But I wonder if you are familiar with the story of Corrie ten Boom, which occurred during the same era. If not, I highly recommend you read The Hiding Place.
Now, how was that? What did you notice about that? What did it seem like to you? What's your take on it?
Yeah, I can see the benefit helps me from kind of rolling downhill a little bit, where suddenly like the story's getting away from me a little bit. Gives me a
Well,
moment.
and here's the thing. Um, you probably had occasion to see young kids like preteens or early teens who are now suddenly forced to make a speech in front of the class or something like that. And you probably notice that a lot of times they go really fast. Well, just get out of this. Let's get it over as soon as possible, right? Right. Now, that's the extreme of no pauses at all, right? They just want to get through it. It's not even that they want to get through it, but they're nervous and they instinctively just go fast.
Yes.
And you have to tell them, slow down, right? But the question is, why would you want them to slow down? The reason, I think, is that if you're listening to someone speaking, um, they're putting out words and there are intervals between the words and the sentences. Especially if what they're doing is speaking about something that's kind of a new idea for you that you had not thought of before. The listener, person listening to you, needs some time to process that. And it's hard to process it right in the middle of the sound part.
Yeah.
It's those gaps, especially like at the end of a sentence or the end of an important phrase in a sentence. Those gaps are those moments of silence are when the listener is going to digest it.
Yeah.
And if you listen to people who are very good speakers,
hmm
you'll find that generally they have often what seems like quite long pauses if you're paying attention. It will seem to you sometimes like too long a pause, right? The audience has fallen asleep, but no, they're processing. And think about speakers. Now, there's a really interesting example, a couple of examples of the kind of speakers I'll give you three types of examples. One, the Winston Churchill during World War II, when things did not look good for England. And I don't know whether you've ever heard his speech when he says, they can invade and we're going to fight them on the beach and we're going to fight them here and we're going to fight them here. And there are huge pauses between those because he wants people to digest that. He doesn't want to just run off a string of words. He
Yeah.
wants them to imagine what it's going to be like fighting them on the beach, right? And then we'll fight them if they get past, you know what I mean? He wants long pauses. And that's considered by many people one of the greatest speeches ever delivered by a head of state.
Wow.
So you can find that on YouTube very easily. Winston Churchill on the beach or fighting on the beach or whatever. You'll be able to find that. Another example, and particularly I've noticed with Black ministers who are preaching to their congregation, and you'll find lots of those around you can watch. They will not only have long pauses, but they'll repeat stuff several times. They don't hesitate to basically say the same thing 2 or 3 times with pauses all over the place, because they want their audience to have plenty of time to digest this. They don't just rush through it.
Yeah.
Listen to Martin Luther King talking, for example.
Yeah.
Lots of pauses. He's not in a rush to get through this talk.
Yeah.
And the other example that I think you'll see a lot are successful politicians. It doesn't matter, conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, ones who are considered to be really effective orators. There are lots of pauses.
Yeah.
Lots of pauses. Sometimes it's a pause to allow the audience to go bonkers for a little bit, or it could be just, I'm saying something important. Think about that for a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go rambling on while they're doing that thinking.
Right.
Because they have to think to follow what I'm going to say. Better to not say anything for a little bit. Now, those are more, that's not quite the same as what you're doing, but the same principle applies. I
Okay.
think you find that if you allow for slightly longer pauses, it's going to be, it may even at the beginning seem like this is just too long. But do experiment with that and then play it back and watch and listen and just see, well, maybe that wasn't so long, Given, I mean, what you said, so you don't have to do a lot of processing, but just imagine someone listening to the first time and you bring up another person, Anne Frank. Well, they need a little time to work out, but oh yeah, Anne Frank, yeah. And the other lady, you're bringing a whole new thing in there. And
Yeah.
you need a little time. Oh, okay, there was another person she's going to talk about. They need to process that.
Okay.
And I think that the amount of time for gaps in speaking that are most effective for you in terms of being able to use that time to do some
Processing.
little thinking, I'm free, or whatever direction you're experimenting with. The amount of time that you have available for that ideally is also pretty much the ideal of what your listeners are going to need to process what you're saying. There's really no conflict.
Okay.
So that's something you have to experiment with. I assume in your little audio studio in the closet that you can do stuff and just erase it and do it over, right? So you can just experiment with that. See how it sounds. Listen, and if I think you're going to find that what you might have thought was like forever pause is actually just about right for someone to absorb it.
Okay. I can do that.
So the pause will benefit you and the audience. And also, here's another place where you might want to explore that, and that's with your teaching.
Yeah.
Because you're talking to these kids, right?
Yes.
And he told me you had 60 of them in one class. I like, well, they're all different, and some of them are probably really quick and get it right, but some of them need more time to process what you're saying.
I
So
have
you
10.
might find that even though it might seem like it's going to take slightly longer, but the amount's going to be minimal, in fact. But that extra time is going to be just what some or many of those kids are going to need to really understand what you're saying. Because
I,
you're telling them stuff they don't know already. It's not like uh, you're uh, uh, reading something to, let's say, your kid when they're going off to sleep, a story they've heard multiple times, and they kind of know the words. And if you skip a word, they're gonna harass you about it, right? I remember when I was a kid, the little engine that could was my thing. And my mother later told me it just drove her nuts reading this over and over. And she would occasionally think, well, maybe just skip a little of the
Ages.
scenery part. Just and she said I would just jump right in it. Wait a minute, you didn't talk about that. Uh, it's not that this is different. This is new stuff, for people. And
Yeah.
they need time to take it in and create little images in their minds and whatever else goes on when someone's listening to someone talking. So you're talking for a living in a lot of places, school and of course with your family and and your book project.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why it's like it was so important that I figure out how to speak right and figure out what changes I needed to make because I knew the mistakes. I was doing something wrong in something I do every single day for multiple hours a day. You
Okay,
do,
here's a suggestion. It's a little presumptuous
yes.
of me. I would ditch right and wrong.
Hmm.
I don't think they're helpful to you.
Okay.
That's kind of a judgment you're putting on yourself. Whereas if you just say, how about just a little easier,
Hmm.
less tension, less
Hmm.
tightening. Right and wrong, right and wrong is not a good dichotomy for this work, I don't think. Because I don't think you can, from an Alexander technique point of view, I don't think it's possible to make a mistake. You might have intend to think something and forget that you had that intention,
Yeah.
and then notice, and then you might notice and think, oh, what's wrong with me? I had this simple thought, and I'm supposed to use it at certain times, and I forgot it right away almost, and oh, something's wrong with me for forgetting it. No, you're gonna forget it. Whether you forget it right away or later, you will definitely forget it. You don't want to be clinging to that thought anyway, because your main thing is reading the book. You just want something that you can put into the background from time to time that'll make your work a little easier.
Right.
Instead of thinking, let's go from wrong to right, let's just thinking maybe let's just be nice to have a little more ease. Not that that could be a direction, but the purpose of the direction is for you to have a little more ease,
Hmm.
not to make you Mrs. Perfect. You know,
Yeah.
it's not about that.
Hmm.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. It's the pieces are coming together.